For a closer look at the prospect for this relationship, I'm joined by Jamie Metzl, a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. And Jamie, so many people have pointed out, and Trump himself, I think, has sort of noted this is going to be difficult. One wonders how this is going to go with so much said on the campaign trail and over Twitter and so much tough rhetoric leveled at the Chinese. What do you think is going to transpire at this meeting today, knowing how the Chinese operate?
Well, on one hand, there are a lot of variables, and more so than in these types of events in the past, because Trump is in many ways a wild card. He said all kinds of things, both on the campaign and as president, and he's tweeted all kinds of very aggressive comments. At the same time, meetings between the U.S. president and the Chinese president are often very scripted affairs. The Chinese are very sensitive to protocol, and you can be sure that every little detail has been ironed out in advance. So that's going to be the question. Is this going to be the kind of meeting we've seen in the past where everything is scripted, or will there be variables and will there be surprises? And if there are surprises, will we even see them? And it's what makes this meeting particularly interesting, but I don't think we're going to see any major fireworks.
You know, it's interesting you say that, because we have seen in the past some missteps, miscues, not shaking the German chancellor's hand, for instance, and, you know, making jokes. And this is a new president, somebody who hasn't been in politics. But optics matter so much for the Chinese back home, don't they?
Well, it's huge. And that's why in the past, when the Chinese have focused on optics and protocol and the Americans haven't, we've ended up looking bad, because the real story of these kinds of meetings is just how the narrative is presented to the world, both domestic constituencies and internationally. And I think in this case, there are going to be very small moments that have the potential to become very significant.
Jamie, there are so many differences, and it's so easy to focus on all of the, the various points of disagreement, especially when you focus on the rhetoric. But again and again, when I talk to people that know the inside and out of these relationships and have followed it for years, they say, listen, these two countries are so much more intertwined than most of us realize. They need each other. There is room for common ground. There needs to be a way to find common ground. Should we focus more on that? Do you think that there are areas where there can be serious progress made and really lay the groundwork for a sort of different kind of relationship? You heard President Trump say when he was talking about Assad, I changed my mind, I evolve, and I'm proud of that. Might we see that happen at this meeting?
Yeah, that's a really important question, Maggie. And absolutely, the United States and China are intertwined economies, and not just economies. We are intertwined with China on so many different levels. And that's why it's a very sensitive relationship on both sides. And we've had a lot of continuity over the years. President Trump has come to office saying that he's going to smash that continuity, but now as president, he represents America's interests. And America needs, on one hand, to be tough with China, and certainly we do not have a reciprocal economic relationship with China, and we need it. Certainly China has been very aggressive in places like the East China Sea and the South China Sea and elsewhere, and we need to make sure that we are resolute in opposition with our allies to that type of aggression. But at the same time, we have a lot of areas of common concern, and if we decide that we want to invest in solving those big problems, there's nothing that the United States and China can't do together. And climate change is a case in point. We made big progress under President Obama, and now that progress is at risk. There may be other areas where there are opportunities for collaboration, but to get there, we need a stable relationship, and we need leaders who are thinking more about the future than certainly seems to be the case right now in the United States.
You pointed out before that with these types of meetings, especially with the Chinese, so much of the heavy lifting and the work, the detail work, is done by the staff, by the diplomatic corps that works so closely together. In this particular relationship, the two men are meeting face to face. How important will the personal relationship be? How much we know Donald Trump probably thrives on that, given his business background. Both men probably want to come out with a win here. How much does the personal relationship element of it matter to the Chinese?
Yeah, well, those are two great questions. The first question about the role of the staff is really essential because the level, the intricacy of the relationship between the United States and China is so immense that no two people can really get to the bottom of it, which is why in advance of a meeting like this, you have all kinds of other meetings. You have huge teams that are dealing with these relationships. But the United States government is not staffed. We don't have an Assistant Secretary of State for East Asia Pacific. We don't have a deputy at the State Department. There are many, many positions which are unstaffed or understaffed. So the United States, in many ways, is flying blind. And that comes to your second question. That puts a lot more pressure on the personal relationship between these two leaders, because if they can establish some kind of rapport, perhaps that can lead the way toward improved, at least to a certain extent, relations in the beginning. That certainly happened with Prime Minister Abe, and we'll see what happens with President Xi.
Yeah, which in this case, not exaggeration to say that all eyes will be watching so closely on this meeting. Jamie, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your expertise. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Jamie Metzl for us.